hydrogen power with my pops. He's about to come in studio for this. And leading us into that, though, I wanted to touch on a quick article here that I saw about nuclear power this morning out of the Wall Street Journal. And I thought this was totally relevant because the conversation that we had last week about nuclear power and kind of how it fits in and the pressures it's under from an economic perspective because there's subsidies going from the U.S. government to some of the other competing power sources, whether it's solar power or wind power or oil or whatever it is. Great article today, totally on topic here with what we were talking about over the past week on Pop Song Tech. Here it is out of the business section. Nuclear plants fall victim to economic pressures. New York's Indian Point plant is latest casualty as political opposition and fracking take a toll. This is an article today by Russell Gold and Cassandra Sweet, saying that utilities are closing U.S. nuclear power plants at a rapid clip as they face competition from cheaper sources of electricity and political pressures from critics. Again, go back and check out episode 34 for my dad's opinion of nuclear power as it relates to these topics. He's a nuclear engineer, spent his career with the Department of Energy and the Department of Defense, knows his stuff. New York's Indian Point plant is about 35 miles north of Manhattan. It's a major source of power for the city and its surrounding suburbs. It's the latest casualty, though. Owner Entergy Corp said Monday that it will close the facility as part of an agreement with the state of New York, whose governor, Andrew Cuomo, has long criticized the plant as a safety threat. Its closure would bring the tally of plants set to close by 2025 to 4, including PG&E Corp's Diablo Canyon plant in California and Entergy's Palisades unit in Michigan. 4 others have already closed in the past 4 years, including Dominion Resource Inc.'s Kewaunee plant in Wisconsin. The retirements are poised to leave 61 nuclear plants in the United States by the middle of the next decade. That includes 2 facilities that are building new reactors. A small number of nuclear plants have closed in the past because of safety concerns or the need for expensive repairs. What's new is the number of plants closing that are licensed and operational, though, but no longer profitable in competitive markets. Nuclear plants everywhere are facing a powerful economic foe: fracking. The extraction technique has unlocked vast amounts of natural gas, making generating electricity from the fuel much less expensive and lowering power prices across the U.S. Entergy cited competition from natural gas as a key factor in the closure of Indian Point on Monday, disclosing that it will recognize a $2.4 billion pre-tax impairment charge in connection with the closure of the plant's remaining units. Skipping forward here, it says nuclear plants generated 20% of U.S. power in the past 12 months, following natural gas at 35% and coal at 30%, according to federal energy data. The remaining balance was 7% hydro, 6% wind, and 1% solar. And stay tuned. We've got a great interview following up on the previous topic with my dad here, talking about that 7% hydro as well in just a moment. But I find this totally interesting, especially in light of all of the stuff going on at the CES and, the focus on electric vehicles, electric powered vehicles that people are buying because they perceive they're doing something good for the environment. Again, the breakdown is clean energy of nuclear power at 25%, not so much for natural gas at 35%, not so much for coal at 30%. Yes, for hydro at 7%, wind at 6%, and solar at 1%. What's in your car? That's the question I have for everyone buying those electric cars right now. This is a big, important topic that we've got here. The increasingly poor economics of nuclear power have led nuclear plant operators in New York, Illinois, and elsewhere to seek new state subsidies to keep the plants operating. The owners argue that they create high-paying jobs in rural areas and are critical tools to combat air pollution and climate change because they produce emissions-free electricity, as does hydrogen power. And for that, I'm going to be excited here to welcome my father, Papa Ranger, back to studio. All right, so continuing with our energy series at Pop Song Tech, I'm really honored to be joined in studio by Papa Ranger. That's right, my Papa, Ranger is back in studio with us. How are you, Dad?
I'm doing great, Otis.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you again for joining us previously on Pop Song Tech to talk with us about nuclear power. And today we're here to talk about the hydrogen economy. Now, Papa Ranger spent his career as a nuclear engineer, has a background in chemical engineering, and a background in working with the Department of Energy in the United States of America. And so the guy is definitely an expert on this stuff and always likes to talk about these things. And I thought, where better to talk about this than instead of at the kitchen table, put him in front of a microphone.
I love microphones.
You see here, I grew up, I'd go to my Papa Ranger here and I'd say, Dad, I've got this simple math equation problem. What is 2 plus 3 plus 7? And, next thing I know is as an 8-year-old, I'd be there getting, education about
basic calculus,
nuclear energy. And I'm like, Dad, I just want to know the answer to this question. And you're telling me about what? Like, why are you telling me about fission?
Knowledge is such a wonderful thing, except when you're 8 years old.
Now, what I was missing then as an 8-year-old, though, was a microphone. I could have just stuck it in front of him, and that could have been the outlet that he was looking for. And I think we've now discovered the outlet here. It's a podcast, Pop Song Tech, and I am your host, Otis Ranger. Thrilled to have my dad in studio today to talk with us about another type of energy, not nuclear energy. Today we're talking about the hydrogen economy.
Hydrogen economy is a wonderful concept. When we think of the different sources of energy, one of the sources that's very interesting today and been fairly thoroughly looked at for things such as powering automobiles is hydrogen. The neat thing about hydrogen, remember that hydrogen is just a gas, and it's basically H on the chemical symbols.
The periodic chart.
The periodic chart, Mendeleev and him and all those guys. But if you take hydrogen and you burn it, the off gas is water. If you take hydrogen and you say, how can I create it? It doesn't occur naturally. I have to find a source of hydrogen. Because hydrogen is such a clean fuel, many people are interested in creating large quantities of hydrogen and using the hydrogen for powering. Let's talk automobiles and fuel cells.
I think that's good because, there's been so much trend over the past couple of years. Elon Musk leading the pack with Tesla and the electric automobile, and you've got all the automobile manufacturers that are now coming in with their own versions of electrically charged cars. You've got the Chevy Volt, for instance, from Chevrolet, and BMW's got its i3 now, and they're just every brand that's out there is coming up with an electric vehicle that's supposed to be a cleaner version than the fossil fueled powered vehicles.
I see where Toyota now has a hydrogen powered car, the Mira.
The Mira.
It's $57,000, and they'll give you 3 years of free fuel. I saw it on the web last night.
Interesting.
And
so
very nice looking vehicle.
Now, I haven't heard a lot of buzz though about hydrogen powered cars as of late. Now, this is something I recall hearing about, back in the 90s when people were starting to think about what are alternatives to regular fuel. Can we burn water, for instance? Can we power a car with water? Can we power a car with something else? You look back at Back to the Future, they were powering cars with garbage.
Fusion, that was fusion power. Mr. Fusion.
That's right, Mr. Fusion right there. And so, we talk about different types of power sources right now. And if it's electric, something's got to produce that electricity for the car upstream. So there is still some element of potential inefficiency in the overall system here if your goal is cleaner energy. But along comes hydrogen again. People are starting to talk about maybe hydrogen might be a better alternative in this space. And you're saying it's not produced anywhere naturally. So how does it come about? Why is it cleaner? Is this something that's really doable?
Oh, yes, very much so. Most of the hydrogen that's produced today, we produce from natural gas. Natural gas is CH4, methane. See, H's are the hydrogens. So there's 4 hydrogens for every carbon. So you could take natural gas and you can treat it, and you get a large quantity of hydrogen and carbon dioxide. Now,
that's bad stuff.
Well, it's bad stuff, but by and large, if you produce hydrogen and then burn it in the cities stay clean, and wherever you created the hydrogen, you have a little bit more CO2, but it's maybe a good trade-off in terms of keeping the cities clean. But hydrogen can also be produced by electrolysis of water. Well, that's a big chemistry sounding name, but it means put two electrodes in water, put electricity through it, and on one of your electrodes you produce oxygen, on the other one you produce hydrogen. See, it splits the hydrogen from the H2O. It takes the hydrogen out of it and the oxygen out of it, splits it. That's called electrolysis. And so you can produce hydrogen that way. It's a little less efficient than producing it from methane gas, but it's cleaner. But again, what did I use for it? I used electricity.
Right.
So I need a source of electricity. Once I have the hydrogen, and we'll talk some more about how I produce the hydrogen in a minute. But,
which you like to do just kind of as a hobby, right? You just at home these days in the garage, it's like mowing the lawn, raking leaves, and producing hydrogen.
Yeah, I work at the hydrogen quite often. It's very gaseous.
Well, this was, like I said, this was something that was pretty popular back in the at the turn of the century, as people were trying to explore alternatives to the traditional gas, traditional fuel, traditional production of energy and electricity. People were talking about hydrogen, but it kind of died off for a while. Why is it coming back now?
Well, two reasons. One is pollution. And if you want to keep pollution down in cities, if you have some other means of powering vehicles, then it's a very clean way of doing it. An example of a big use of hydrogen today is to power in large warehouses, which are indoor, to power the forklifts. I have forklifts in these very large facilities, and they go around lifting things, and it's all indoors. Right. So I don't want to be burning fossil fuels because it would be a tremendous stink inside. By and large, they use batteries. Well, to have batteries, you have to have battery chargers, and it takes a long time to charge a battery. So what they found is they can take hydrogen, and they don't burn it, but they use it in a fuel cell. Now, let me tell you, I'll give you the 1 minute version of what a fuel cell is. I told you that electrolysis is I put two electrodes in water, and when I pass a current through them, I create oxygen and hydrogen.
Right, it splits it apart.
A fuel cell reverses that. It takes hydrogen, it brings in oxygen, and by in the fuel cell, it produces electricity and gives off, you guessed it, water. A fuel cell will create electricity. So if I have a source of hydrogen, and it turns out that most of the cars that are powered by hydrogen use hydrogen with fuel cells. And so I put a fuel cell under the hood, and I have a tank with pressurized hydrogen or liquefied hydrogen, and I have through this fuel cell I create electricity, which powers an electric motor, which powers an electric car. So instead of being hooked up to a plug somewhere where I have to charge my battery, I basically have a source of hydrogen which I can fill up at a hydrogen tank. If you go look at places like I talked about these warehouses that are using fuel cell driven forklifts, they just have a large hydrogen supply, and when the forklift is out of gas, so to speak, they hook up on a pressurized tank, and within a few seconds they recharge the pressure of the tank, and they're ready to go. They don't have to take the batteries out and have big rooms that do nothing but charge batteries.
Right.
So,
now, let me understand though, hydrogen though. So when you talk about a hydrogen tank like that, if we're talking about hydrogen as a fuel, when I think about fuel and I think about gas stations, I think about a liquid, right?
Yes.
And so when I take that nozzle out from the gas station, or I guess I live in New Jersey, so they do it for me, the gas station attendant sticks that thing in there. There's liquid going from one place to another.
Right.
In the case of hydrogen, is that still in liquid form, or is that in a gaseous form?
Where it's used in the Baltic states and in places that have fleet vehicles in cities, buses, for example, they have a large high-pressure tank. Now, that high-pressure tank that they use could be a liquefied hydrogen tank, but what they pressurize the tanks with is basically high-pressure hydrogen.
Got it.
So it's basically you have a low pressure, like your balloon is out of pressure.
Right,
you hook up,
right.
And instantaneously it blows it back up.
Got it. Is hydrogen more like propane? Like I've got propane tanks at home. Would you say that it's more kind of like that? It's liquid until it's exposed to the air and it turns into a gas?
Yes, exactly. You look at your butane lighter, for example. Butane lighter is basically liquefied, but it's under a very low pressure that causes it to liquefy. And when you flick your Bic, you get it out as a gas, and the spark ignites it, and that's how you get your flame. Hydrogen it requires a lower temperature to liquefy, and so you need what they call a Ewer flask, which is like a thermos bottle. And so you have this thermos bottle in your trunk if you want to use a liquid hydrogen form. I think Mercedes-Benz car used a liquefied hydrogen tank, and so you would need a source of liquid hydrogen to fill up that tank. We'll talk a little bit about about distribution in a second, but let me mention one other way of using hydrogen. The fuel cell is a very